I found my husband's secret phone hidden inside his golf bag. He had been telling me for 15 years that he hated technology, that smartphones gave him headaches, that he preferred the simple life. But there it was, a brand new device with a pink glitter case, and when I turned it on, I discovered he had been living an entire second life with my own sister. What I did next made them both regret ever underestimating me, and trust me, they deserved everything that came to them. Let me tell you how I got here. My name is Geraldine, and I am 67 years old. I have spent 43 years married to a man named Theodore, a man I believed was the most honest, most predictable, most boring person on the planet. That was exactly why I married him. After growing up with a father who gambled away every paycheck and a mother who cried herself to sleep every night, I wanted stability. I wanted someone who would never surprise me, never disappoint me, never make me question my own reality. Theodore seemed like the answer to every prayer I had whispered into my pillow as a young girl in Savannah. We met at a church picnic in 1981. I was 24 years old, working as a secretary at a law firm downtown, saving every penny I could to eventually open my own business. Theodore was 29, an accountant at a local bank, quiet and unassuming, the kind of man who wore the same brown shoes every day and ordered the same meal at every restaurant. He asked me to dance under a magnolia tree, and his hands were steady, his voice was calm, and his eyes never wandered to any other woman in the crowd. That was enough for me. That was more than enough. We married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the same church where we met. My sister Lorraine was my maid of honor. She was 3 years younger than me, with the kind of beauty that made men turn their heads and women hold their husbands closer. But I never worried about her. She was my sister, my blood, the person who had shared a bedroom with me for 18 years, who had held my hand when our father disappeared for weeks at a time, who had promised me we would always protect each other. If you are watching this and you have ever trusted someone completely, only to discover that trust was a beautiful lie, make sure you are subscribed, because this story is going to show you exactly what happens when the truth finally comes out. Theodore and I built a life together in a modest house on Magnolia Street. I worked at the law firm for another 5 years, saving every bonus, every overtime payment, every penny that did not go toward our mortgage. Then, in 1987, I opened my first bakery. I called it Sweet Geraldine's, a tiny storefront with just enough room for a counter, a display case, and my dreams. Theodore supported me in his own quiet way. He never told me I was foolish for wanting more. He never complained about the early mornings or the flour that seemed to permanently coat our kitchen. He just nodded, handed me my apron, and went to work at the bank. By 1995, Sweet Geraldine's had become a chain of 7 bakeries across Georgia. By 2005, we had expanded into 3 neighboring states. By 2015, I was supplying wedding cakes and pastries to some of the finest hotels in the Southeast. I had built something real, something lasting, something that had my name on it. And through all of it, Theodore remained exactly the same. Steady, predictable, boring. At least that is what I believed. Lorraine never married. She always said she was waiting for the right man, someone who would sweep her off her feet and give her the fairy tale ending she deserved. She moved to Atlanta in her 30s, worked various jobs, dated various men, and called me every Sunday to complain about how lonely she was. I felt sorry for her. I sent her money when she needed it. I invited her to every holiday dinner. I treated her children from a brief relationship like my own niece and nephew. I never once suspected that behind her sad eyes and lonely voice, she was planning to take everything I had worked for. The day everything changed began like any other Tuesday morning. I woke up at 4:30, as I always did, to check on the main bakery before the morning rush. Theodore was still asleep, snoring softly, his face peaceful against the pillow. I kissed his forehead, grabbed my keys, and drove through the quiet streets of our neighborhood. The air smelled like jasmine and fresh grass. The sky was just beginning to lighten at the edges. I felt grateful, content, completely unaware that my entire world was about to collapse. When I returned home around 11, Theodore had already left for his golf game. He played every Tuesday and Thursday with a group of retired men from the bank, or so he told me. I went to the closet to grab a jacket, and as I reached past his golf bag, I heard a strange sound, a buzzing, a vibration. I stopped, listened. It came again, muffled but distinct, from somewhere inside the bag. I unzipped the front pocket. Nothing. I checked the side compartments. Nothing. Then I opened the main section, moved aside his clubs, and there it was. A smartphone in a bright pink glitter case, the kind of phone a teenage girl might carry, hidden beneath a layer of golf balls. My heart stopped. My hands trembled. I picked it up and stared at the screen. There was a notification, a text message. The preview showed just enough words to make my blood run cold. Miss you already. Last night was incredible. Cannot wait to see you Thursday. Love, your Lori. Lori. That was what Theodore called my sister, what he had always called her, ever since we were young. I felt the room spin around me, my vision blurred. I had to grab the door frame to keep from falling. For a moment, I convinced myself there must be some explanation. Maybe this phone belonged to someone else. Maybe Theodore found it somewhere and was planning to return it. Maybe Lori was just a common nickname. But when I unlocked the phone, because Theodore had used the same passcode for everything since 1992, I found hundreds of messages, thousands of photographs, videos that made me physically ill, emails detailing secret meetings, hotel reservations, weekend getaways to places Theodore told me he was visiting for banking conferences. And it was not just an affair. It was a 15-year relationship, 15 years of lies, 15 years of betrayal, 15 years of my sister and my husband looking me in the eye and pretending to love me while they destroyed everything I believed in. I sat on the floor of that closet for what felt like hours. I cried until I had no tears left. I screamed into a pillow until my throat was raw. I wanted to call Theodore and demand an explanation. I wanted to drive to Atlanta and confront Lorraine. I wanted to burn down everything we had built together and watch it turn to ash. But then, something shifted inside me. The rage did not disappear. It crystallized. It became something cold and sharp and patient. I realized that if I confronted them now, in the heat of my pain, they would turn it around on me. They would call me hysterical. They would minimize their betrayal. They would make me feel like the villain in my own story. So I did not say a word. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. I wiped my tears, washed my face, and started planning. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. I smiled at Theodore across the dinner table while knowing he was lying to my face. I answered Lorraine's Sunday phone calls and listened to her complain about her lonely life while knowing she had been sleeping with my husband since before I turned 50. Every moment felt like a performance, and I had to give the performance of my life. I started gathering evidence. I photographed every message on that secret phone. I printed every email. I documented every hotel charge, every restaurant receipt, every gift he had bought for her with money that should have been ours. I discovered that Theodore had been slowly transferring funds from our joint accounts into a private account. Small amounts at first, then larger sums over the past 3 years. He was building a nest egg, preparing for a future that did not include me. I also discovered something that broke my heart all over again. Lorraine had children from her relationship years ago, a daughter named Bethany and a son named Marcus. I had helped raise those children. I had paid for their school supplies, their birthday parties, their first cars. And according to the messages on that phone, Theodore had been acting as their secret father figure for over a decade. He attended their graduations while telling me he was at work. He helped Bethany move into her first apartment while telling me he was at a golf tournament. He had created an entire second family, a shadow family, using my money and my trust and my love. One night, about a month after my discovery, Theodore told me he was going to a weekend banking conference in Charleston. I nodded and smiled and packed his suitcase for him. I even ironed his shirts. But as soon as his car disappeared down the driveway, I got in my own car and followed him. He did not go to Charleston. He drove straight to Atlanta, to a condominium in a gated community, where Lorraine was waiting for him at the door in a silk robe. I watched them embrace. I watched them kiss. I watched them walk inside together, hand in hand, as if they had done it 1,000 times before. Because they had. I did not confront them that night. I drove home in silence, my hands steady on the wheel, my mind racing with plans. I knew that I could not just expose them. I needed to destroy them. Not physically, never physically, but financially, socially, emotionally. I needed them to feel the same crushing betrayal that I felt. I needed them to lose everything they had taken from me. If you have ever discovered a truth that changed everything you thought you knew about your life, tell me in the comments. I want to know that I am not alone in this. The opportunity came 3 months later when Theodore announced that he wanted to throw a surprise party for Lorraine's 60th birthday. He said it was such casual cruelty, such absolute confidence that I would never suspect anything. He told me that Lorraine had been feeling depressed lately, that she needed something to lift her spirits, that it would mean so much to her if we hosted the party at our house. Our house. The house I had paid for. The house where he had lied to me every single day for 15 years. I agreed immediately. I said it was a wonderful idea. I volunteered to handle all the planning, all the catering, all the decorations. Theodore looked surprised, then relieved. He probably thought I was just being a good sister. He probably thought I was too naive, too trusting, too old and blind to ever suspect anything. That was his first mistake. I planned every detail of that party with surgical precision. I invited everyone who mattered. Theodore's colleagues from the bank, my employees from the bakeries, Lorraine's friends from Atlanta, her children, Bethany and Marcus, who had no idea that the man they called their secret stepfather was actually their aunt's husband. I rented a beautiful tent for the backyard. I ordered flowers from the finest florist in the city. I prepared my famous 7-layer chocolate cake, the one that had made Sweet Geraldine's famous across the Southeast. And I prepared something else, something special. The night of the party, our house was filled with over 80 guests. Lorraine arrived in a stunning red dress, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She hugged me at the door and whispered, "Thank you so much, Jerry. This means everything to me." I smiled and hugged her back. I told her I loved her. I meant neither of those things. Theodore stood beside her all evening, the devoted brother-in-law, the supportive family member. He gave a toast to her health and happiness. He told everyone how much Lorraine meant to our family. He looked at me with such innocent eyes, such practiced sincerity, that I almost admired his skill at deception. Almost. Around 9 o'clock, I gathered everyone in the living room for a special presentation. I told them I had prepared a slideshow of memories, photographs from Lorraine's life that would celebrate her journey from a young girl in Savannah to the woman she was today. Everyone gathered around the large screen I had set up. Lorraine sat in the center, surrounded by her children, her friends, her colleagues. Theodore stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder, already smiling at memories that had not yet appeared. The first few slides were innocent enough. Baby pictures, graduation photos, Lorraine at her first job, at her first apartment, at various birthday parties over the years. Everyone laughed and clapped and remembered the good times. Then the screen changed. The first photograph showed Theodore and Lorraine in a hotel room, their bodies intertwined, their faces clearly visible. The room went silent. Someone gasped. Theodore's hand dropped from Lorraine's shoulder. The next photograph showed them at a restaurant in Charleston, the city where Theodore claimed to have attended so many banking conferences. They were kissing over a candlelit dinner. Their wedding rings were clearly visible. Well, Theodore's wedding ring. The ring I had placed on his finger 43 years ago. The photographs kept coming. Theodore and Lorraine on a beach in Florida. Theodore and Lorraine at Bethany's college graduation. Theodore and Lorraine in the very bed where I slept every night, their faces frozen in expressions of guilty pleasure. I had found that photograph on the secret phone, dated just 2 weeks before the party. Lorraine stood up, her face white as paper. "Geraldine, stop this. Stop this right now." Her voice was shaking. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. But I did not stop. I could not stop. 15 years of lies demanded at least 15 minutes of truth. The final part of the presentation was not photographs. It was a video. A recording I had made 3 days earlier when I confronted a private investigator who had been following Theodore for months. The investigator had discovered something I had missed. Theodore and Lorraine were not just having an affair. They were planning to have me declared mentally incompetent, to take control of my assets, to push me into a nursing home while they enjoyed the empire I had built with my own hands. The video showed documents, legal filings, emails between Theodore and a lawyer who specialized in elder exploitation cases, a detailed plan to convince everyone that I was suffering from dementia, that I could no longer manage my own affairs, that Theodore needed to step in as my legal guardian. They were going to steal everything from me, not just my husband and my family, but my bakeries, my savings, my entire life's work. The room erupted. Bethany stood up and screamed at Theodore. "You told me my father abandoned us. You told me you were the only man who ever loved my mother. You lied to me my entire life." Marcus grabbed Theodore by the collar and had to be restrained by 3 other guests. Lorraine collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably, while her friends backed away from her as if betrayal were contagious. Theodore tried to speak. He tried to explain. He said I had taken everything out of context. He said the photographs were doctored. He said I was clearly having some kind of breakdown, exactly the kind of mental instability he had been worried about. But no one believed him. No one could believe him. The evidence was too overwhelming, the betrayal too complete. I stood in the center of the chaos, and for the first time in months, I felt at peace. I was not angry anymore. I was not hurt. I was simply done. I looked at Theodore, the man I had loved for 43 years, and I saw a stranger. I looked at Lorraine, the sister I had protected my entire life, and I saw a parasite. They had tried to take everything from me, but they had failed. They had underestimated me. They had underestimated the quiet strength of a woman who had built an empire from nothing. The next morning, I filed for divorce. My lawyers, the same firm where I had once worked as a secretary, assured me that I would receive everything. The house, the bakeries, the accounts that Theodore had not yet managed to drain. They also filed criminal charges related to the elder exploitation scheme. Theodore and Lorraine might not go to prison, but their names would be forever associated with their attempted theft. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. Theodore moved in with Lorraine, but their relationship did not survive the exposure. Without the thrill of secrecy, without the satisfaction of deceiving me, they had nothing left to build on. Lorraine's children cut off contact with both of them. Bethany told me in a tearful phone call that she could never forgive her mother for what she had done to me. Marcus said he was ashamed to share her blood. I sold the house on Magnolia Street and bought a smaller place closer to the main bakery. I promoted my most loyal employees to management positions and started spending more time on the things that truly mattered. I joined a book club. I started gardening. I traveled to Paris and Rome and all the places Theodore had always said were too expensive and too far away. I discovered that life after betrayal was not an ending. It was a beginning. And you might wonder if I feel guilty about how I exposed them. You might wonder if I regret the public humiliation, the destroyed relationships, the chaos I unleashed at that birthday party. The answer is no. I do not feel guilty. I do not have regrets. They chose to betray me for 15 years. They chose to plot against me, to steal from me, to treat me like an obstacle rather than a person. All I did was tell the truth. The truth was their destruction, not me. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the girl I used to be, the young woman who danced under a magnolia tree with a man she thought was safe. I wish I could tell her that safety is an illusion, that trust must be earned and re-earned every single day, that the people who claim to love us are sometimes the ones who hurt us most deeply. But I also wish I could tell her that she is stronger than she knows, that she will survive everything life throws at her, that she will build something beautiful from the ashes of her pain. I am 67 years old. I have been betrayed by my husband and my sister. I have lost the family I thought I had. But I still have my bakeries. I still have my name. I still have the sunrise every morning and the satisfaction of knowing that I refused to be a victim. They tried to break me, and they failed. That is not a sad ending. That is a triumph. If this story touched your heart, please like and share it, because sometimes hearing about another woman's pain is what makes us feel less alone in our own. And if you have a story of your own, a story of betrayal and survival, I want to hear it. We are all in this together, and together we are stronger than they ever imagined. The months after the divorce were a strange mixture of grief and liberation. I found myself crying at unexpected moments, not for the man Theodore had turned out to be, but for the man I thought I married. I cried for the 43 years I had spent believing in a lie. I cried for the children we never had, because Theodore always said he was not ready, when the truth was that he was already playing father to Lorraine's children in secret. I cried for every kiss, every anniversary dinner, every whispered promise that had meant nothing at all. But between the tears, there were moments of pure, unexpected joy. I woke up one morning and realized I did not have to pretend anymore. I did not have to smile when I did not feel like smiling. I did not have to cook his favorite meals or iron his shirts or listen to his boring stories about the bank. I was free in a way I had never been free before, and that freedom tasted sweeter than any pastry I had ever created. I threw myself into the bakeries with renewed energy. I developed new recipes, hired new staff, opened 2 new locations in cities I had always wanted to expand into. I worked alongside my employees, my hands covered in flour and sugar, my heart full of purpose. The newspapers called me an inspiration, a woman who had turned personal tragedy into professional triumph. I did not care about the newspapers. I cared about the bread rising in the oven. I cared about the customers who told me that my chocolate croissants were the best thing that had ever happened to their mornings. I cared about building something that would outlast my pain. Lorraine tried to contact me several times in the first year. She sent letters that I threw away without reading. She called from different numbers and I blocked each one. She even showed up at the main bakery once, her face thin and tired, her eyes red from crying. She begged me to talk to her, to give her a chance to explain, to forgive her just a little. I looked at her through the glass door, this woman who had shared a womb with me, who had shared a bedroom and a childhood, and 1,000 memories that were now poisoned by her betrayal. I felt nothing, not anger, not sadness, not even satisfaction, just emptiness where love used to be. I told my staff to escort her out. I never saw her again. Theodore's life after the divorce was a slow, steady decline. Without my money to support him, without the respectability of our marriage to hide behind, he became exactly what he had always been underneath the surface: a fraud, a coward, a man who had spent his entire life taking from others without ever building anything of his own. He moved from Lorraine's condo to a small apartment, then to a boarding house, then to a shelter. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had tried to reconcile with Lorraine, but she blamed him for destroying her relationship with her children. He tried to find work, but his name was forever linked to the scandal, and no reputable firm would hire him. He ended up alone, just as he deserved. I would be lying if I said I took no pleasure in his downfall. I am human after all. But mostly, I felt indifferent. He had stopped mattering to me the moment I discovered the truth. His suffering was not my revenge. It was simply the natural consequence of his choices. He had planted seeds of deceit for 15 years, and now he was harvesting the bitter fruit. My real focus was on healing, on rebuilding, on creating a life that was entirely my own. I started therapy with a wonderful woman named Dr. Patricia, who helped me understand that the betrayal was not my fault, that I had done nothing to deserve it, that some people are simply incapable of honesty, no matter how much love you give them. She helped me separate my sense of self from my marriage, to see that I was more than Theodore's wife, more than Lorraine's sister, more than the victim of their cruelty. I also found unexpected companionship in the most unlikely places. There was Margaret, my former secretary at the main bakery, who had always treated me with kindness and respect. After I promoted her to manager, she became a true friend, someone I could confide in without fear of judgment. There was Harold, the elderly gentleman who came in every morning for a blueberry muffin and a conversation about the weather. He lost his wife to cancer 3 years ago, and we bonded over our shared understanding of grief and loss. There was even a stray cat who started appearing at my back door, demanding scraps and eventually my affection. I named him Biscuit, and he became my constant companion, curling up in my lap while I read, purring me to sleep on the nights when loneliness threatened to overwhelm me. 1 year after the divorce, I received a letter from Bethany, Lorraine's daughter, the girl I had helped raise, the young woman who had screamed at Theodore on the night of the party. The letter was long and tearful and full of apologies. She said she had always suspected that something was wrong between her mother and my husband, but she had been too afraid to investigate. She said she felt guilty for accepting Theodore's gifts, his attention, his presence in her life, knowing now that it all came at my expense. She said she wanted to reconnect with me, if I could ever find it in my heart to forgive her. I wrote back immediately. I told her that she had nothing to apologize for. She was a child when the affair began, and even as an adult, she had no way of knowing the full truth. I told her that my anger was reserved for the people who had betrayed me, not for the innocent bystanders caught in their web of lies. I told her that I would love to see her, to rebuild our relationship, to be the aunt she deserved instead of the one whose blindness had allowed such cruelty to flourish. Bethany and I met for lunch a few weeks later. She cried when she saw me. I cried too. We held each other in the middle of that restaurant, two women who had been hurt by the same people, finding comfort in each other's arms. She told me that her mother had tried to justify the affair, claiming that Theodore had seduced her, that she had been lonely and vulnerable, that it was all just a terrible mistake. Bethany did not believe her. Neither did I. 15 years is not a mistake. 15 years is a choice, made over and over and over again. We started meeting regularly after that. Bethany would visit me at the bakery, learning recipes, helping with the morning rush, becoming part of the family that Lorraine had tried to steal from me. Her brother Marcus eventually reached out as well, though he was more guarded, more uncertain of his place in my life. I welcomed them both. They were not responsible for their mother's sins. They were victims, just like me. and together we were learning to heal. 2 years after the divorce, I received news that Theodore had passed away. He died alone in a hospital room from complications related to his failing liver. Years of stress and drinking had finally caught up with him. I did not attend the funeral. I did not send flowers. I did not feel anything at all, except perhaps a faint sense of closure. The man who had betrayed me was gone, and with him went the last remnants of my anger. There was nothing left to be angry about. There was only the future, stretching out before me like an open road. I am 70 now. 3 years have passed since that terrible birthday party, and I have rebuilt my life in ways I never imagined possible. The bakeries are thriving. I have opened 10 new locations and franchised the brand to entrepreneurs across the country. Sweet Geraldine's is no longer just my dream. It is a legacy, something that will continue long after I am gone. But more importantly, I have found peace. Not the false peace of ignorance, but the true peace of acceptance. I accept that I was betrayed by people I loved. I accept that I will never understand why they chose to hurt me so deeply. I accept that some questions do not have answers, and some wounds do not fully heal. But I also accept that I am strong enough to carry those wounds, to transform them into wisdom, to use them as fuel for a life that is richer and more meaningful than anything I had before. I wake up every morning in my small house near the bakery. I drink coffee on my porch and watch the sunrise, the same sunrise I have watched for 70 years, but somehow brighter now, somehow more precious. I spend my days doing work that matters to me, surrounded by people who value me, building something that will outlast my pain. And at night, I fall asleep with Biscuit purring beside me, grateful for another day of freedom, another day of truth, another day of being exactly who I am. They tried to break me, my husband and my sister, the two people I trusted most in this world, conspired against me for 15 years. They lied to my face. They stole my love. They plotted to take everything I had built. And when I discovered the truth, I had a choice. I could let their betrayal define me, or I could define myself. I chose myself. I chose truth. I chose survival. And now, sitting here at 70 years old, I can tell you with absolute certainty that I won. Not because I destroyed them, though they certainly destroyed themselves. I won because I refused to be destroyed. I won because I took everything they threw at me and transformed it into strength. I won because I am still here, still standing, still building, still loving life despite everything they did to poison it. If you are going through something similar, if you have discovered a betrayal that shattered your world, I want you to know that you can survive this. You can more than survive. You can triumph. It will not be easy. There will be days when the pain feels unbearable, when you question everything you ever believed, when you wonder if you will ever feel whole again. But you will. I promise you will. The truth has a way of setting us free, even when that truth is devastating. And once you are free, once you have released the people who hurt you from their power over your heart, you will discover a strength you never knew you had. You will build a life that is entirely your own. You will find joy in unexpected places. You will learn that the ending of one story is simply the beginning of another. My story did not end with Theodore's betrayal or Lorraine's cruelty. My story continued, and it became more beautiful than I ever imagined. Yours will too. I believe in you, even if we have never met. I believe in your strength, your resilience, your capacity to transform pain into purpose. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, we are not alone. We are never alone. We are a community of survivors, a sisterhood of strength, and together, we are unstoppable. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And thank you for reminding me that even the darkest stories can have beautiful endings. The seasons changed, and with them, so did I. That first winter after Theodore's death was surprisingly mild, but something inside me had thawed regardless. I found myself taking long walks through the neighborhood, noticing details I had ignored for decades. The way the oak trees twisted toward the light, the sound of children laughing in distant yards, the smell of someone else's dinner drifting through an open window. For 43 years, I had been so focused on maintaining my marriage, on building my business, on being the perfect wife and sister and employer, that I had forgotten how to simply exist in the world. I started a journal. Not the kind of journal where you record daily events, but the kind where you write letters to yourself, to the people who hurt you, to the person you used to be. I wrote to Theodore, telling him everything I never said while he was alive. I told him how much I had loved him, how completely I had trusted him, how his betrayal had cut deeper than any knife could reach. I told him that I forgave him, not because he deserved forgiveness, but because carrying anger was too heavy a burden for my old bones. I told him goodbye, and when I sealed that letter, I felt something release inside me, something I had been holding for far too long. I wrote to Lorraine too, though those letters were harder. She was still alive, still out there somewhere, still carrying the weight of what she had done. I told her that I had loved her more than almost anyone, that I had spent my entire life protecting her, that I would have given her anything she asked for if she had just been honest with me. I told her that I would never understand why she chose deception over sisterhood, why she valued Theodore's affection over my trust, why she was willing to destroy our family for something as fleeting as desire. I told her that I would never forgive her, not because I was incapable of forgiveness, but because some betrayals are too profound to be forgiven without losing yourself in the process. I never sent those letters. They sit in a drawer in my bedroom, sealed and silent, waiting for nothing. But writing them helped me process emotions I had been suppressing for years. It helped me understand that grief and anger are not weaknesses to be hidden, but experiences to be honored, examined, and eventually released. Spring came, and with it, new beginnings. I decided to renovate the main bakery, updating the equipment, expanding the seating area, adding a small garden where customers could enjoy their pastries in the fresh air. The project consumed me in the best possible way, giving me a focus that was creative rather than destructive. I worked alongside contractors and designers, making decisions that were mine alone, shaping a space that reflected who I had become rather than who I used to be. The grand reopening was held on my 71st birthday. Over 200 people attended, including employees, customers, friends, and family. Bethany gave a speech about resilience and second chances. Margaret presented me with a commemorative plaque that now hangs behind the counter. Harold, my blueberry muffin friend, brought his granddaughter, who asked me to sign her apron because she wanted to be a baker when she grew up. I cried, of course. I seem to cry at everything these days. But they were good tears, happy tears, the kind that wash away pain rather than drowning in it. That summer, I did something I had dreamed about for decades, but never allowed myself to pursue. I took a cooking class in Tuscany. 3 weeks in the Italian countryside, learning to make fresh pasta and traditional sauces, drinking wine with strangers who became friends, watching sunsets over rolling hills that looked like they belonged in paintings. Theodore had always dismissed my interest in Italian cuisine. He said American food was good enough for him, that there was no need to travel halfway around the world to learn how to boil noodles. But Theodore was gone, and his opinions no longer mattered. I came home from Italy transformed, not just in my cooking skills, though those had certainly improved, but in my sense of self, my understanding of what was possible, my belief that life could surprise me in beautiful ways, even at 71. I introduced new Italian-inspired items to the bakery menu, and they became instant bestsellers. I started offering cooking classes on weekend mornings, sharing what I had learned with customers who wanted to expand their own horizons. I even began planning a trip to France for the following year, because once you start saying yes to life, it becomes addictive. Autumn arrived, painting the trees in shades of gold and crimson, and with it came an unexpected visitor. A man named Walter appeared at the bakery one morning, tall and silver-haired, with kind eyes and a warm smile. He ordered a chocolate croissant and a cup of coffee, then sat at a corner table for 3 hours, reading a book about the history of bread making. He came back the next day, and the day after that, always ordering the same thing, always sitting in the same spot, always leaving a generous tip. After about 2 weeks of this routine, I finally approached him. I asked if he was researching something, if he was writing a book, if there was any reason he had chosen my bakery as his second home. He laughed and admitted that he had heard about me through a mutual friend, that he was curious about the woman who had built an empire from nothing, that he wanted to see if the pastries were as good as everyone claimed. They are, he said, but that is not why I keep coming back. I keep coming back because this place feels like home. Walter and I became friends. Not romantic, at least not initially, but something deeper, something built on shared experiences and mutual respect. He had lost his wife to cancer 5 years earlier, had spent the years since rebuilding his life, had discovered that loneliness is not the same as being alone. He understood grief in a way that few people do. He understood that healing is not linear, that some days are harder than others, that moving forward does not mean forgetting the past. We started having dinner together once a week, then twice. Then we stopped counting and simply enjoyed each other's company whenever it felt right. He came to the bakery in the mornings. I went to his house for Sunday dinners. We took walks in the park, attended concerts, visited museums, did all the things that couples do without ever putting a label on what we were. My employees noticed, of course. They whispered and smiled and made comments about how happy I seemed. Margaret, ever the romantic, started playing love songs on the bakery sound system whenever Walter walked through the door. I pretended to be annoyed, but secretly, I loved it. I love being seen as someone capable of joy, capable of connection, capable of starting over at an age when most people have given up. Walter asked me to marry him on my 73rd birthday. We were sitting in the garden I had built behind the bakery, surrounded by flowers and fairy lights, eating slices of the anniversary cake I had designed for a customer who never picked it up. He got down on one knee, which made his joints crack audibly, and produced a simple gold band that had belonged to his grandmother. He said he had waited his whole life to find someone like me, that he knew we only had a few years left, that he wanted to spend every remaining moment by my side. I said yes. Not because I needed a husband, not because I was afraid of being alone, but because I had learned that love does not have an expiration date, that the heart does not stop growing just because the body slows down. Walter was not Theodore. He was honest and kind and present in a way Theodore never was. He asked about my day and actually listened to the answer. He remembered small details and celebrated small victories. He made me feel valued, cherished, seen. We got married in the bakery garden, surrounded by the people who mattered most. Bethany was my maid of honor, just as her mother had been all those years ago. But this time the role was filled with genuine love rather than hidden malice. Margaret handled the catering, insisting that I should not have to work on my own wedding day. Harold gave a toast that made everyone cry. Even Biscuit attended, wearing a tiny bow tie that one of my employees had special ordered. I am 75 years old now. I have been married to Walter for 2 years, and they have been the happiest years of my life. Not because everything is perfect, nothing ever is, but because I have finally learned to accept imperfection, to embrace the messiness of being human, to find beauty in the cracks rather than trying to hide them. The bakeries continue to thrive. I have stepped back from daily operations, trusting my team to carry forward the vision I created. I spend most of my time in the kitchen now, developing new recipes, teaching classes, mentoring young bakers who remind me of myself at their age. I have written a cookbook that will be published next year, filled with recipes and stories and lessons learned from a life of unexpected turns. Theodore and Lorraine feel like characters from another lifetime. I rarely think about them anymore, and when I do, the pain has dulled to a distant ache rather than a sharp wound. They took 15 years from me, but I refuse to give them any more. My life is too full, too rich, too precious to waste on people who never deserved my love in the first place. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had never found that phone. If I had remained ignorant, continued trusting, died believing that my marriage was real. Part of me thinks that might have been easier, but a larger part of me knows that living a lie is not really living at all. The truth set me free, even though it almost destroyed me first. And freedom, I have learned, is worth any price. If you are watching this and you are in the middle of your own storm, I want you to know that the clouds will clear. Not immediately, not painlessly, but eventually. You will find your way to the other side. You will discover strength you never knew you had. You will build a life that is entirely your own, shaped by your choices rather than the betrayals of others. And if you have already made it through, if you are on the other side looking back, I want you to celebrate yourself. Celebrate your survival. Celebrate your resilience. Celebrate every small victory and every hard-won lesson. You earned it. You deserve it. You are exactly who you were meant to become. Thank you for being here with me today. Thank you for listening to my story. And thank you for reminding me that no matter how old we are, no matter how much we have been through, there is always room for more love, more growth, more life. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, the best revenge is not destruction, it is happiness. It is building something beautiful from the ashes. It is proving to everyone, including yourself, that you are so much more than the worst things that happened to you. I am Geraldine. I am 75 years old. I have survived betrayal, rebuilt my empire, found love again, and discovered peace. And my story is not over yet. Neither is yours. The bakery was quiet when I arrived this morning, just as it always is before dawn. I unlocked the door, turned on the lights, and breathed in the familiar scent of flour and yeast and possibility. This has been my ritual for nearly 40 years, and even now, even with a team of capable employees who could handle the morning prep without me, I cannot bring myself to give it up completely. Walter thinks I am stubborn. He says I have earned the right to sleep in, to let someone else flip on the ovens, to enjoy the luxury of a slow morning. But he does not understand what this bakery means to me. It is not just a business. It is proof. Proof that I am capable of creating something lasting. Proof that I can survive anything life throws at me. Proof that a girl from Savannah with nothing but dreams and determination can build an empire that spans the country. I started mixing the dough for the morning croissants, the same recipe I developed 38 years ago, modified slightly based on what I learned in Tuscany. The rhythm of kneading is meditative, almost hypnotic. My hands know what to do without conscious thought. My mind is free to wander, to remember, to process the journey that brought me to this moment. I think about my mother sometimes, during these quiet early hours. She died when I was 42, never knowing that her husband's gambling had shaped her daughters in such different ways. I became obsessed with stability, with security, with building something no one could take from me. Lorraine became obsessed with taking from others, with finding shortcuts, with believing she deserved what she had not earned. We were both responding to the same trauma, but our responses could not have been more different. I wonder if my mother knew, somehow, what Lorraine would become. She always worried about my sister. She always said that Lorraine needed more supervision, more guidance, more boundaries. I dismissed those concerns as favoritism, as the natural anxiety of a mother who could not help but compare her daughters. But maybe she saw something I refused to see. Maybe she recognized the seed of selfishness before it grew into the choking vine that strangled our family. Or maybe I am being unfair. Maybe Lorraine was not born selfish. Maybe she became that way through circumstance, through disappointment, through the accumulated wounds of a life that did not turn out as she hoped. I will never know. I stopped trying to understand her years ago. Some people are puzzles that cannot be solved, and attempting to solve them only wastes time that could be spent on more productive things. The croissants went into the oven just as the sun began to rise. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stepped outside into the garden, watching the sky shift from purple to pink to gold. This is my favorite time of day, the moment when anything seems possible, when the mistakes of yesterday have been forgiven and the challenges of tomorrow have not yet arrived. I stand in this in-between space, breathing in the cool air, feeling grateful for another morning, another chance, another day. Bethany is coming for lunch today. She visits at least once a week now, sometimes more. She has become the daughter I never had, the family that remained after the family I thought I had was revealed to be an illusion. We do not talk about Lorraine much anymore. There is nothing new to say. But we talk about everything else. Her career, her relationships, her hopes and fears and dreams. She is 37 now, a successful interior designer with her own firm, a woman I am proud to know. She told me recently that she considers me her real mother, that Lorraine gave her life, but I gave her an example of how to live it. I cried when she said that. I seem to cry a lot these days, but as I mentioned, they are mostly good tears. The tears of someone who has been given more than she ever expected. The tears of someone who discovered that family is not about blood. It is about choice. It is about showing up. It is about love that is demonstrated through actions rather than just proclaimed through words. The morning rush began around 7. Customers streamed through the door, grabbing pastries and coffee on their way to work. Their faces familiar even when I do not know their names. This is the community I have built. These are the people who have supported my business through everything, who stood by me during the scandal, who celebrated my wedding to Walter, who treat me not as a celebrity or a curiosity, but as a neighbor, a friend, a fellow human being trying to make it through another day. I handed a blueberry muffin to Harold, who still comes in every single morning, despite his arthritis and his failing eyesight. I asked about his granddaughter, the aspiring baker who asked for my autograph years ago. She is in culinary school now, following her dream, and Harold beams with pride every time he mentions her. I tell him to bring her by the bakery during her next break. I will teach her some tricks that they do not cover in the textbooks. Margaret arrived around 8, taking over the counter so I could retreat to the kitchen. She has been with me for 25 years, longer than some marriages last, and I trust her more than I trust most family members. She knows everything about the business, about the recipes, about the delicate balance of art and commerce that makes a bakery successful. When I am gone, she will carry on the legacy. That thought used to make me sad, but now it brings me comfort. Some things are meant to outlive their creators. Lunch with Bethany was wonderful, as always. We sat in the garden, eating salads and sipping iced tea, talking about nothing and everything. She showed me pictures from a recent trip to California. She asked for advice about a difficult client. She laughed at my stories about Walter's attempts to cook, which always end in mild disaster despite his good intentions. We held hands across the table at one point, two women connected by tragedy and transformed by love. After she left, I found myself thinking about legacy. Not the bakeries, though those are certainly part of it, but the less tangible things, the lessons I have learned, the wisdom I have accumulated, the truth I have discovered about what matters and what does not. I know now that money is a tool, not a goal. It can buy comfort and security, but it cannot buy happiness or love or peace. Theodore had access to my money for 43 years, and it did not make him faithful. Lorraine took from me for 15 years, and it did not fill the emptiness inside her. True wealth is measured in relationships, in experiences, in the quiet satisfaction of a life lived with integrity. I know now that trust must be earned, not assumed. I gave Theodore and Lorraine my trust without requiring them to deserve it. I believed in them because I wanted to believe, because the alternative was too painful to contemplate. But trust that is not verified is just hope wearing a costume. The people who truly deserve our trust are the ones who prove themselves through consistent action, who show up day after day, who choose honesty even when lies would be easier. I know now that forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not the person who hurt you. I forgave Theodore not because he apologized, he never did, but because carrying hatred was poisoning my own heart. I released him from my anger so that I could be free. Lorraine, I have not forgiven, and I am at peace with that choice. Some betrayals are too profound for forgiveness. Accepting that reality is not weakness, it is wisdom. I know now that it is never too late to start over. I was 67 when I discovered the affair. I was 67 when I filed for divorce, exposed their crimes, rebuilt my business, and began the painful process of healing. I was 73 when I married Walter. I am 75 now, and I am still learning, still growing, still becoming who I am meant to be. Age is just a number. The spirit does not age unless we let it. And I know now that the ending of one story is always the beginning of another. Theodore's betrayal was the end of my first marriage, but it was also the beginning of my liberation. Lorraine's cruelty was the end of our sisterhood, but it was also the beginning of my independence. Every loss contains the seed of a gain if we are willing to look for it. Every door that closes opens a window somewhere else. The bakery is closing for the evening. My staff is cleaning up, counting the register, preparing for tomorrow. I am sitting in the garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and red, feeling the cool breeze on my face. Walter will be here soon to pick me up for dinner. We are trying that new Italian place downtown, the one that everyone says reminds them of Tuscany. I am content. Not happy every moment, because no one is happy every moment, but content in a deep, abiding way that I never experienced during my marriage to Theodore. I know who I am. I know what I value. I know that whatever time I have left, it will be spent on things that matter, with people who matter, in pursuit of a life that is authentically mine. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Thank you for bearing witness to my pain and my triumph. Thank you for reminding me that our experiences have meaning when we share them, when we connect with others who understand, when we refuse to let our stories be silenced by shame or fear. If you learn something from my journey, I ask only this: pass it on. Share your wisdom with someone who needs it. Offer support to someone who is struggling. Be the person you wish had been there for you during your darkest days. That is how we change the world. Not through grand gestures, but through small acts of kindness, repeated over and over until they become a wave that lifts all boats. My name is Geraldine. I am 75 years old. I have loved and lost and loved again. I have built and broken and rebuilt. I have discovered that the human heart is capable of more than we imagine, both for cruelty and for compassion. And I have learned that no matter what happens to us, no matter who betrays us or abandons us, or tries to steal our joy, we always have the power to choose our response. We always have the power to rise. Choose wisely. Choose yourself. Choose life. And if you need encouragement along the way, remember this. Somewhere in the world, a 75-year-old woman is running a bakery empire, married to the love of her life, surrounded by people who value her,